So thank you for everybody for joining us this morning. We're here to, as part of the HMPPS Insights event. This was originally going to be held in person, but thanks to Nick at HMPPS Insights, this is now an online event, which is great. And we've had loads of people register, so it's really good to see so much interest in this topic that we're going to be talking about this morning, which is about how and why we should be doing more to increase the number of people with lived experience in the criminal justice workforce and how we might go about achieving that. So I'm Nina Champion, I'm the director of the Criminal Justice Alliance, and I'm going to be talking to you about a report that we published last year called Change from Within. And it captured the insights of people with lived experience who are working in the criminal justice system to change it from within. I'm going to speak initially for about sort of 10 or so minutes, using some slides to talk through kind of some of the key findings of the report, how we went about it, and some of the key recommendations. And then we're going to move on to hear from our three amazing panelists that we've got joining me today. So from all around the country, we've got Peter joining us from Wales CRC. We've got Brendan joining us from London, who works for St Giles. We've got Darren in Lancaster. Are you in? Liverpool. You're in Liverpool, yeah. So from the Well community, which sort of is all that sort of Cumbria, sort of Liverpool area. So yeah, we're sort of all around the country joining us today. And then there's going to be a chance for people to ask questions. I'm going to ask them some questions, and it'll be up to you as sort of guests to be able to answer questions. So just a few kind of housekeeping things in case people haven't been on Zoom as part of a webinar. So you'll be able to see us as the speakers and the panelists, but we can't see you. But there is two functions that you can use throughout the webinar. So one is the chat function. So there's a webinar chat, so please feel free to share comments or resources within the chat function at the side. And there's also a Q&A button. So if you've got questions for either myself or for any of the speakers, if you can put your questions into that Q&A rather than into the chat, as you go along, as you think of them, that's fine. And then when we come to the audience Q&A, I'll use those questions to put towards Brendan and Peter and Darren. And if you have any problems, just put a note in the chat. Please feel free to tweet about the event, and yeah, we'll make a start. I'm going to just share my screen so that you can see some slides. I'm going to try and do that now. Excellent. I hope that's working for everybody. Yep. Great. So just by way of introduction, the Criminal Justice Alliance, if you don't know, we have 160 member organisations that work right across the criminal justice system, from prevention to courts, policing, prisons and probation and victim services. And we want to try to influence sort of systemic, long-term system and culture change within the criminal justice system for a fairer and more effective criminal justice system. And the way that we do that, we have at the moment three kind of proactive work streams around effective scrutiny and accountability, a restorative criminal justice system, and the third one, which this piece of work is linked to, is around a fit for purpose and diverse workforce. And there's really two strands to this work. One, we're looking at race diversity in the criminal justice workforce, and we had a webinar about 2 weeks ago with the Justice Secretary and David Lammy and a panel of speakers talking about how we increase race diversity right across the criminal justice workforce. And then we've got this strand of work, which is about how to increase the number of people with lived experience right across the criminal justice workforce. In terms of the definition of lived experience, we try and take a broad definition of lived experience. There's a really good definition by Baljeet Sandhu, and if you haven't read any of her work on lived experience leadership, I highly recommend it. And she described it as those who felt the direct personal impact of a social issue or combination of issues. So obviously here we're talking about criminal justice, so people with criminal records, with experience of prison, people who've been victims of crime, families of people impacted by the criminal justice system. But in terms of this particular report that we wrote, Change from Within, we focused on the particular lived experience of people who'd been in prison, who then wanted to work in the criminal justice system. So this is the report, Change from Within. It was an exploratory piece of work, really. It was carried out by a fantastic guy called George, who was with us on release on temporary licence on Rottal last year. And he spoke to quite a number of people with lived experience who are working in the criminal justice system in all sorts of different roles and different organisations in the public, private and voluntary sector, to really understand what their experiences had been and to understand what some of the challenges were and the barriers and things that had helped them to succeed. The methodology, the analysis and the recommendations were all helped to be co-produced by our lived experience expert group, which are made up of some of our member organisations, and it's chaired by CJ Burge, who's one of our trustees who also works at St Giles. It features 6 case studies of organisations in the voluntary sector who employ a significant number of people with lived experience. And this is 2 of my favourite quotes from the report from 2 of those organisations. So it's time to change the diversity of the criminal justice workforce and seek to ensure it's more representative of those it serves and embraces the challenge and human wisdom that they bring with them. And that was Paula Harriott, who's on our expert group at Prison Reform Trust. And then Anne-Marie Douglas, who's the Director of Peer Power. I love her quote, "You'll never have a truly empathic system until you have a mix of lived and learned experience at the top." And that's the link if anyone wants it to get a copy of our report that's on our website. So in terms of the key findings, so there was 4 key findings really. Firstly, that people with lived experience employed in the criminal justice sector can help to improve outcomes and provide fresh skills, ideas, solutions and cultural change. But the criminal justice sector needs to improve the meaningful inclusion of people with lived experience as paid employees, influencers and leaders. We also found there was a range of structural, systemic and cultural barriers facing people with lived experience who seek employment in the criminal justice system, which needs to be tackled. But also there was good practice out there. There was a number of organisations working to provide people with lived experience with paid employment in the criminal justice system. But actually more needs to be done to kind of build on this movement right across the voluntary, statutory and private sector providers. And these were the 6 organisations that we looked at specifically within this report as case studies. And it's interesting because we don't have the data from MOJ or HMPPS of the number of people with lived experience that they employ within the statutory sector. But we do know in the voluntary sector, so Clinks does a state of the sector annual report. And last year they asked some really useful questions, which found that 67% of voluntary sector organisations consulted service users about design and delivery of their services. 53% had service users as volunteers, and 29% recruit service users as staff. So I think, and what we can see over time from the state of the sector reports is this is improving over time, and it's clearly heading in the right direction. But I think this idea of employment is the thing that's obviously trailing a bit further behind. So that's why we're sort of interested in what we can do more systemically to try to increase that figure. So the report looked at the value and impact of lived experience, which was wide. So it included things like purpose, passion and drive, empathy and compassion, courage and resilience, connection to the community, bringing knowledge and facilitating sort of culture change with organisations, so breaking down that kind of them and us sort of barriers, and understanding problems and helping to generate solutions. There's also, we looked at these kind of current pathways or routes that people who are now working in the criminal justice system had taken to get there. So that included really having to take the initiative themselves, doing things like public speaking, blogging, using social media, doing volunteering roles, doing sort of roles in prison, and really sort of developing their sort of networks and contacts. But what we found is that everyone that we spoke to had to be really individually proactive in seeking out those opportunities and really kind of having to go over and above to meet the right people, these sort of chance encounters to end up where they ended up. And actually what we felt is that there's no real sort of structured progression route. So with, for example, whether it's construction or retail or other areas, there might be much greater sense of a kind of career pathway and networks and contacts out there, whereas working in the criminal justice system, it didn't seem as structured. And so that's one of the things we're hoping to get from as we go forward. The report also looked at some of the challenges and solutions. So these included things like issues around disclosure, issues around kind of workplace culture and whether someone feels included or whether they sort of feel separate or one of them. There was this concept around sort of imposter syndrome, but on the flip side, you know, people saying that, you know, when they were made to feel valued and trusted, that helped to overcome that sort of individual barriers. There was a discussion in the report around kind of the right mix of lived experience and diverse workforce, and often this really depended on the organisation and what the roles were. There was a discussion in the report around support and mentoring that employers could offer, around mental well-being, particularly for those kind of frontline peer roles, around the need for potentially things around clinical supervision or other kind of well-being support. The report also discusses this sort of intersectionality and double disadvantage, so people who were from Black or minority ethnic communities, and also, you know, with lived experience, that kind of double stigma and some of the issues that brings with it. There's also a discussion in the report around prison and probation restrictions, around bottle release on temporary licence, potentially sometimes acting as a barrier to people accessing those key kind of volunteering opportunities or education opportunities that can be the pathway into this career. There's quite a big discussion in the report around the vetting system, around prisons and being able to go and work back in prisons, and the vetting process is there. Parity Commission rules also can act as a barrier to people getting trustee roles or senior leadership roles within organisations if you've got particular convictions. And we know that even though there's a waiver option, that actually very few waivers are allowed. So I know that Unlock are doing a lot of work in this area. And then there's two things that are also discussed in the report that are initiatives that the MOJ and HMPPS have. One is IFI, which is going forward into employment. And this is actually run by the Cabinet Office, and it's a scheme to support veterans, but also to support people with, leaving prison into roles in the civil service. And they've been successful in getting people into roles, for example, in the Department of Work and Pensions, with the Prison and Probation Ombudsman, in the court service, but actually very few roles have become available for them to place people in within the MOJ and HMPPS itself. And there are also a number of barriers to people accessing this scheme. One, because it only is for people leaving prison rather than people on probation. The second one is that there's actually some blanket exclusions on particular offences. The third one, that the roles are all set at quite a low level, and some people obviously might want to be able to go in at a higher level. And also the process itself can be quite bureaucratic. So, but we've been working with going forward into employment to sort of feed in some of this feedback to see how it could be better used, and really for MOJ and HMPPS to be championing this scheme and to really kind of be putting themselves forward. And there's also the New Futures Network people might have heard of, which sort of broker relationships between prison leavers and between employers, but they don't have at the moment a specific kind of work strand around supporting people into the criminal justice sector. Lastly, the report also looked at this idea of progression. So as well as people being kind of recruited into the sector and being retained and being in the sector, actually looking at how do people progress up into managerial roles or leadership roles or self-employment or social entrepreneurship. And some of the people that I've spoken to talked about the positive impact of higher education and leadership and professional development opportunities that they'd had within their organisations to enable them to progress in their careers. And this is something that we're particularly interested at in Criminal Justice Alliance and our lived experience expert group, where at the moment we're scoping the development of a leadership programme. And this is based on some programmes that I saw when I travelled to the States a couple of years ago with the Churchill Fellowship, and wrote this report, which I've just got on the slide here, which was really about supporting people with lived experience, emerging leaders, to help break that glass ceiling, to support people into those leadership roles within the sector. So just briefly, some of the recommendations. So we've got recommendations for HMPPS, for them really to review policies and procedures that are disrupting the ability of people with lived experience to work in the criminal justice system, like prison vetting, for example, to ask them to produce a strategy and toolkit and training on best practice to aid employment and progression of people with lived experience. And I must say, so Brendan, who's one of our speakers, we're both on the HMPPS Service User Advisory Group run by Ruth Walters, and they've been great in setting up a small work group so that we can take this piece of work forwards. It would also be great if the MOJ and other departments could do more research into the experiences and impact of employing people with lived experience to better understand the barriers. This was just sort of like an initial exploratory piece of work. We'd like to see the Cabinet Office publish the number of people with convictions employed in the criminal justice system, and to amend the criteria of the going forward into employment scheme to include more people. We'd like the New Futures Network to kind of broker roles in the criminal justice system and publish data. And also we'd like to see more incentivising of commissioning of organisations led by or employing a significant number of people with lived experience. We also had recommendations around prison education to support people to gain employment in the criminal justice system, inviting employers in to meet people, establishing prison university partnerships and access to higher education. And then for individual employers to think about developing strategies to ensure they recognise and support the needs of employees with lived experience, obtain feedback from those staff to provide opportunities for progression and adopt fair chance recruitment policies. Just going to go now. So that's a bit of a sort of a whirlwind tour of the report, but you can read it in full. And we'll share that sort of report with everyone afterwards. But now I want to sort of get on to hopefully what's going to bring that report alive and ask some questions of our three fantastic panelists to bring some of that alive. So the first question I'm going to ask, and I'm going to go around them individually to answer this, is whether they can tell me about their role in the criminal justice sector and what a typical day involves, and also why they love their job. So I'm going to start in my top left-hand corner of my screen, which is Brendan. Sorry, Brendan.
Sorry, can you go say the question again, please?
Yeah, so just if you could tell people about your role in the criminal justice system, what a typical day involves and why you enjoy it.
My role is I manage a project which supports people with complex needs with the end result of them getting into training and employment. So I'll take a considerable amount of referrals from probation, work with quite a lot of other stakeholders. I manage a team of 17 in total, probably. It changes because it's probably around 12 peer advisors at any one time, and 8 or 9 staff. And every day is different. Everything is different. It's although it's an education, training, and employment project, it's dealing with so much more. It's supporting people to work with mental health or mental health services. It's getting people counselling. It's supporting people with benefits. It's supporting people into housing. It's supporting people onto anger management courses. It's supporting women to flee domestic violence. It's so wide. It's untrue. So there are specialist workers within my team, which are there's women's workers, women specialist workers, and there are a few other different types of workers in there as well. So it's kind of multidisciplinary. 70% of my team have got lived experience, as in they've got lived experience of either being in the criminal justice system or recovery or mental health, and their experiences more or less give them the drive to support the people that they're working with. Do I think my job is a job? No, I don't. Every once in a while, maybe once a month I do when I have to do reports. But in the majority, it's not a job. It's fun to a degree. I do find it funny to get paid for this sometimes. But yeah, every day is different. And I think a typical day is so wide. It's so wide.
Brilliant. Thanks, Brendan. That's great. I love that. I know I always say to people, I don't think I've worked a day in my life as well. I think when you enjoy it, it doesn't feel like work as well. So I'm going to come to Peter next. If you can, tell us about your role and what a typical day involves and why you enjoy your job.
Oh.
Yeah, that's good.
Did you ask me a question then, Nina?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I was going to come to you next.
I just had a call from on the phone, so I just swiped it off.
Oh, no problem. Same question to you, Peter.
Same question to Brendan there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my name's Peter Salami. My role in the criminal justice system began in 2013 when I joined an offender management team in North Wales as a probation service officer. That involved supervising offenders in custody in the community, managing their risk, protecting the public, and assisting them in their journey of desistance through rehabilitative tools from probation, such as accredited programs, one-to-one supervision, or structured work. Then I went into the interventionist team in 2017. I was first doing a hybrid role. I was an offender manager as well as a programs facilitator. And then mid-2017, restorative justice was introduced as an intervention. So I was trained in restorative justice, and in 2018, I went into that full-time as a restorative justice facilitator, which was the same band as a probation service officer. It was just a more specialist role. And last year, I became the restorative justice coordinator, which is a band 4, it's a probation officer band. And I now coordinate a small team of facilitators who bring victims and offenders, service users together with a view of repairing the harm that is caused from the offence. So that's my role. A typical day for me involves driving from probation office to probation office, assessing the suitability of service users to take part in restorative justice. And if I'm not doing the assessments, then I will be preparing others for their outcomes who would have been assessed at an earlier stage. And if I'm not in the office assessing service users or preparing others, then I'm meeting victims, assessing victims, preparing them for their outcomes as well. And then in between the appointments in the office, in between the home visits to the victims, I'll have my emails to respond to, inquiries about restorative justice. I'll be scheduling meetings, writing reports, signing off on risk assessments that the facilitators are doing before they achieve their outcomes. So that's a typical day-to-day for me. Why do I love my job? Well, I love my job because of the journey I took to get to where I am now. For me, every day is a blessing. Every day I walk into the probation office, any probation office, and I've got my badge and I use my badge to get in. I've got such a sense of pride that, I always say to myself every day, you might believe this or not, but I say to myself every day, wow, I still, years later, can't believe, or a little bit of me can't believe sort of, wow, you're working for the probation service. But then at the same time, of course, I can believe it because I know exactly what it's taken for me to get to where I am. So I love my job. I also sort of love my job because I think it utilizes a lot of my personal qualities and skills as well. The nature of my job is one that I'm a passionate believer in as well. Restorative justice offers victims and service users an opportunity to repair the harm that was caused through communication, and being part of that healing process is very powerful. And that's just it feels like, it doesn't feel like a job, as you were saying, Nina, as you were saying, Brendan. You know, I when I go to work, really don't feel like I'm working. It just feels like, you know, I'm doing something which I really love. Each outcome that I have, or that I'm part of as a restorative justice coordinator, just really, it reinforces to me the importance of the work, and something I learn something new every time. So you know, it's a very challenging job. It's a job that requires a lot of professionalism, but is very empowering as well. So that's why I love my job. Hope I've answered all the questions there, Nina.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thanks, Peter. And last but certainly not least, Darren. So yeah, you could tell people about your role in the criminal justice sector, you know, what you kind of do typically, and why you love your job.
Hey everyone, good morning. Thanks for inviting me on here. And my name's Darren Shields. I'm probably the only Scout in the house. But I work for the Well Communities. It's based in Cumbria, Barrow, Lancashire. It's a recovery organisation, and everybody who are all, you know, all lived experience, all you know, in recovery, all the staff that work for the Well. I work in the prison, delivering groups in Old Coast Prison in Liverpool. We're subcontracted to G4S, so we deliver groups in the prison, and we also do community connector role through the gate. So the lads that come through our groups, and some that don't, we just get referrals sometimes for lads that want support and want to try and stay out and recover. And we do the referral, and we'll pick them up the gate, and we'll introduce them into recovery communities, into volunteering roles, training, education. And I love my job because this might sound a bit corny or cheesy, or, you know, but I get to see miracles. I really do. It's difficult. Don't get me wrong. You know what I mean? It's, the percentage isn't that high, you know, for people to be recalled or relapse, and but I get to see miracles. I get to see desperation turned to passion, to purpose, and I can physically, visibly see that myself. So like Peter and Brendan are expressing, I wake up every day, walking, getting out my car, putting me keys around my waist, walking across into the prison, getting onto the wing, getting to talk to some of the lads, and getting expressions from them like, "You melt the walls for us. You know, you're that thing that can kind of bring the walls down." I nearly cried when this lad said this. And this lad's like 4 years in recovery, in the prison, who's out in the next 2 years. He's done a long sentence, and he's turned his whole life around in the prison. And he's like an example to others. So when someone says something like that to me, that just, never mind I melt the walls for them, but it melts my heart. So I love my job. I really do. And it gives me a purpose. You know, I've got a purpose within me, my family life, and, you know, but this gives me an extra kind of boost, if you will. And some of the examples that we see in the community, I've got one for you. You know, we empower people to try and change and get into recovery, and whatever that wants to be for them, you know, because one shoe doesn't fit all. So whatever they want to do, we'll encourage them. And this guy, he was quite a loner. He quite isolated a lot. So he come out and he went into an approved premises, and we supported him, you know, and just kind of kept him on the right track and taking him out to parks and introducing him to kind of something different to what he's always known, without drinking and using drugs. And slowly but surely, this guy, you know, he got some counselling, and he got treatment for cancer. He got through that. Then we managed to link him in with housing organisations. He got himself a better accommodation, a flat. Then from that flat, he got into his own place. And now he's settled. He's about 15 months into recovery. He's living back in his local area. The cancer's cleared. And that for me makes me enjoy my job, to see people like him. So I don't know if that's answered the question, Nina.
Absolutely. Thanks, Darren. Peter, we did need those tissues after all, I think. It's this is getting emotional already. I just had one of the comments on the chat saying, I love to see the passion and commitment shown by the speakers on this event. So yeah, thanks for that. That's brilliant. I love that melting the walls as well. I think that's just such a brilliant analogy. So the second question is, that I want to ask you is, what do you think are the benefits of the criminal justice sector employing more people with lived experience in a whole variety of roles? And can you give some examples from your own role of why lived experience has been important in your role? Who would like to start first on that? Do you want to go to that, Brendan?
Yeah, I'll go. I guess I give a personal thing. So I started off teaching toe by toe, teaching people how to read through the Shannon Trust, and then when I came out, I volunteered for about 2 years. I could have went into warehouse work, or I could have went and been a welder, and I could have been all of these other jobs, but I didn't. I wanted to continue what I was doing whilst I was away, and I enjoyed doing it. I enjoyed helping people. So I volunteered for 2 years, and I don't even know where I was going with this. I was volunteering for 2 years, then I became a caseworker, then I became a senior caseworker, and I ended up managing a project which supported specifically people with convictions into employment, of which we doubled all of our targets, mainly because we could have stopped when we hit the targets, but we just wanted to help as much people as we possibly can. Now, as a manager, I've been supporting peer advisors or people with lived experience into this sector for probably around 8 years. And some do, some make it. Some probably around 30% of the people who want to do it make it, and they make it mainly because of their self-determination more than anything else. But it's great. It's like watching all of the peer advisors that I've been working with over this. It's an amazing journey with each individual. It's like a roller coaster of passion and determination. It's like you go along with them for the ride for 6-9 months, a year, and then they might relapse, or they might move on to another project, or they might get employment. Like there's a good example of somebody recently who didn't do too well as a peer advisor, but because we gave him opportunity to make mistakes and to learn from those mistakes, he was able to move into his first professional role within the sector with a better understanding, and then now he's a senior caseworker, and that's like in 2 years. But I think what I've noticed is that it's not a job. it really isn't a job for the majority of the people who are. It's not a job. It's helping other people and get kick out of it. And maybe there is a slight narcissistic part to that, but everyone's getting a kick out of helping other people, changing people's lives, and it is what I think by supporting those people and by giving individuals choices that they've may never had before, you're actually changing their whole view of the world. You're supporting people to put food in their fridges, to maintain relationships with their partners, to maintain relationships with their children, to be role models and be role models themselves to other people. People working with lived experience, and there are various other parts of lived experience. So there are lived experiences as much as there are lived experiences of social issues. There are lived experiences of being a father, or the lived experience of being an artist. There's loads of these other different types of lived experiences, which make in each individual, and it's the combination of all of those lived experiences is what makes the passion, rather than one particular either being in prison or being in recovery. It's more than that.
We talked, Brendan, when we had a chat before, you mentioned something about emotional intelligence. I just wondered if you wanted to kind of pick up on that a bit, because I thought it was really interesting what you were saying.
Yeah, it seems that the peer advisors or people with lived experience have no issue with asking the right questions. They're not going to go around the houses to find to it. They're going to talk directly and ask the question. As Darren would probably say, have you relapsed, or have you? Are you doing what you need to do at home? Are you really? You're taking the mickey now. Like you've been. It's 6 months. We've had this funding for you for 6 months, but really, what the hell is what's keeping you from doing what you need to be doing? You need to be getting yourself. So what is it that's holding you back? And that there are personal experiences or parable type conversations that someone with lived experience may have with clients or participants, which change the way clients or participants think, or get them to or excites a thought, or they may have a eureka moment based on conversations. The amount of times so I've sat outside my office having a roll up and watched individuals where they've come into the office and their head is down and their life is, and they feel however they feel, and then when they're coming out of the office, they're walking up straight. They're just literally come out of the office and they look at me or look at whoever I was with and go, my life has changed. It's basically because they've been given choices, and they've been in an environment where it is comfortable for them. There's no sanctions. There's no. It's a voluntary service. So there's no commitment, but yet because they feel comfortable working with people with lived experience, they come back and they achieve more. Actually, I don't actually know any other environment. So I can tell you about engineering, and I can tell you about working in warehouses, and I can tell you about working in nightclubs, but I can't really tell you about working in any other environment in this sector other than working with people with lived experiences. But I do know that it excites people. Okay, yes, it doesn't always work. But in the majority, it excites people, and people feel comfortable talking to individuals who have those type of experiences, because if they feel that they're not took. They feel that they're, I don't know, people have these mental blocks where they can't speak to certain professionals, or they can't, so it stops them from seeing certain things, or disclosing certain things, or disclosing certain parts of their lives. I think speaking to someone with lived experience supports that, and supports that conversation, and encourages it to a brighter future. Yeah.
Amazing. Thanks, Brendan. Just want to read out another message from the chat, which says, from someone who says, I've worked in HMPPS for 14 years. Never have I felt so moved or inspired. Reminds me why I do my job. So yeah, it's really lovely. And also from someone from Shannon Trust saying that amazing to hear how helping people learn to read has led you to what you're doing today. So
yeah, it gave me a job in the prison, which was in a company called Foundation Training Company, which then had a community project, which then I volunteered with outside, and I wouldn't have got that job in that workshop if it wasn't in 2x2.
Amazing. Thanks, Brendan. Peter, I'm going to come to you next, if that's okay. So yeah, what do you think are the benefits of the criminal justice sector? And I guess, you know, from your perspective, not just the voluntary sector, but also, you know, the statutory sector, like probation services, employing more people with lived experience in a variety of roles.
I think I would just underline everything Brendan said, and just add that I think people with lived experience employed in the criminal justice sector, particularly probation, would tend to have sort of more passion, more drive, I think, because of the journey that they will have taken to get to that point. Inevitably, will have been a sort of an uphill struggle in terms of having to overcome a number of challenges and barriers. So because they've had to go through that journey, when they get to the point of, you know, employment with probation, for instance, or any other organisation in the criminal justice sector, then that creates a huge sense of pride, which I feel every day, a huge sense of responsibility as well to do an excellent job, and sort of it creates, or it sort of lends itself well to having a lot of passion, and sort of it would result in employees who are there and in the job for the right reasons. Just, you know, going off what Brendan was saying, I think because people with lived experience, you know, have lived experience, and are working in the criminal justice sector with service users who are going through their own experiences, that relatability, I think, means that the staff member with that lived experience is more likely to go the extra mile to sort of help out, will spend that little bit extra longer in supervision, having these conversations. I think when you've got somebody in the criminal justice sector, or other members of staff, just do the job, right? And, you know, do the job to tick boxes. All right, I've only got so amount of time with you, so that's all I can spare because I've got this, that, and the other, you know, requirements on my time, which everybody has. But I think if you've got lived experience, you understand the importance of spending that little bit extra time. You understand the importance of being passionate when you're speaking. You understand the importance of engagement and honesty. Whereas if you're just doing it as a job, you focus on those things less, I would say. That's not to say people without lived experience can't be like that. Of course, I just think there, in my experience at least, there are fewer members of staff who are like that. I also think, sorry, my notes have gone off. People with lived experience have, you know, whatever that lived experience might be, whether it's drugs or violence or gangs, etc. That makes them a little bit more resilient to stress, and that's something which they can transfer over into the workplace, which then allows them to sort of be quite resilient individuals, and they're able to carry out multiple tasks, and can manage their time effectively. In my opinion, also, they might be more likely to be more solution focused when it comes to problem solving, because they can use their lived experience without being explicit, and develop realistic plans and be more proactive. I think coupled with that should be more support in the workplace from senior management. But those lived experiences allow the individual to develop a greater sense of empathy and compassion for the service users. And this is important for fostering good working relationships and wanting to work towards the best for the service user, and creating realistic solutions. Because service users, especially the ones who, from a probation point of view, who have been on probation a number of times, when they get into that supervision or appointment with you, they'll know if you're genuine or not, just by the way you come across, just by the words you use, just by the tone of voice, the way you express what you're saying, is a cue for the service user to see whether or not this person who sat opposite me is invested in my change. Okay. And if they can see you're invested in their change, I think that is going to be helpful. It's not going to be the be all and end all, because at the end of the day, you're working with service users, and if they want to change, they will. If they don't want to change, they won't. So that's important to remember. But if they are thinking about change or are ready to change, and they see somebody in front of them who is equally as invested in their change as they are, then I think that's going to help not only the working relationship, but the likelihood of that person making substantive changes whilst on supervision with you will be increased, if you're genuine, and if you're honest, and if you are able to convey that during the appointment. And I think having lived experience means that you're going to be able to do all those things more naturally. That's not to say if you haven't got lived experience, you can't. Of course, there are excellent probation officers and probation service officers that I've worked with over the years, fantastic officers. So that experience has actually taught me that, without lived experience, you can still be passionate and impactful for service users. But having lived experience myself, and having spoke to Brendan and Darren a few times now, I also believe that if you have that lived experience, it comes natural to you. So those are some of the benefits I think criminal justice sectors, including probation, can gain from having people with lived experience.
That's amazing. Thanks, Peter. Just going to read out a couple of other comments. So we've had a comment from someone saying that they're a probation officer with lived experience as well, and they totally agree that there should be more of a push for creating opportunities for peers with experience. I agree with Peter that most staff do lack empathy with service users. And then we've also had a comment in the chat, in the Q&A, which is, it's really amazing to hear from all you criminal justice sector heroes. Thanks for sharing. So yeah, there's a really nice comments coming in. So I'm going to go over to you now, Darren. So yeah, what do you think are the benefits of the criminal justice sector employing people with lived experience?
Well, I think Peter and Brendan have more or less answered it all, but it had me going. Then it's like, yeah, and we might sound biased by as if to say, this, but for me, I can't skim over this without kind of expressing, like, the empathy thing what Peter was talking about, the compassion. Like, and these weren't, like, I didn't walk into these services and know they were lived experience. I later come to pass. But what happened for me, it was unspoken. It was an unspoken language. It was a probation officer. It was a key worker. And both these people, I just felt it. I just felt it, and it wasn't until years later that I found out they had lived experience. They didn't say, "Oh, I've been there, done that, and wore the t-shirt and the shoes." I just felt it. Well, like Brendan said before, my eye, I couldn't look at anyone in the eye I couldn't, and that got really lonely and dark for me. When this person was looking at me and invited me into the office and sat me down with a cup of tea and sort of looked at me, even though I weren't looking back, and suggested a few things, and I went away and I had an appointment for a week later, and when I went back, this time I was looking at her in the eye. This time I believed what she was saying was the truth. I felt the sincerity. I felt the empathy and the compassion, and that spurred me on to a stepping stone of other places. But it wasn't until years later that I found out them two people had lived experience. Now, for me, in my role, you know, like in the prison, you know, it's like it's a lot, as we know, you know, offenders and, you know, are rebellious, and and I'm not saying that the staff in there are bad at the job. They're not. They're really not. It's just the mindset of the inmates, of the lads that are in there, which was once me, was, you know, you don't conform. You've got this false pride, this ego, and you don't show weakness. You don't listen. You go against it. So with lived experience, like, I don't know, it's kind of, it dilutes the atmosphere. I mean, with this COVID-19 going on and everyone being on lockdown, and us, I work alongside another lad who's also got lived experience, and we thought we might be getting in the way, because they only allowed out at that time early, and it was 20 minutes for 10 people on the wing at a time. So I'm saying, am I getting in your way? You know, to the staff, and they're going, no, actually, Darren, you're helping it, because there's a lot of hostility and the energy is a bit like thingy, and, you know, you are diluting that. So I think everyone's, Peter and Brendan, have covered how valuable lived experience is, but also within the teams. I think I learn a lot from the staff, you know what I mean? And I think they learn a lot from us. I think from the top down, it needs to be there to kind of filter through and dilute, you know, the empathy and compassion thing. I don't know if I've made any sense, but that's
perfect sense. No, that's amazing. We yeah, a couple of other comments. So lived experience creates opportunities for creating better, realistic resource pools. Resources are tight, but when you've experienced situations, you can better advise. So that's another one of the chats. So the next question I've got was sort of just to, I guess, ask you what your route was into your role and what helped you get where you are today in your career. I know, Brendan, you touched a little bit on you know, some of your volunteer roles and other bits, but is there anything else you wanted to kind of draw on in terms of what helped you get to where you are?
So I've done a level, I applied to do the level 3 advice and guidance qualification when I was volunteering, and I waited about a year for it. When I'd done it, I'd done it in the summer of 2009. I more or less walked in with all the coursework and handed it to the trainer assessor, because I found all the stuff on Sitting Girls, and handed her all the work. Then, so that supported me to become a caseworker. And then when a couple of years later, I became a senior caseworker, and I'd done a level 4 qualification. And I also had a professional mentor through St. Giles at that time as well. I can't remember his name. Someone from Price Cooper Waterhouse. And then I became a team leader. All throughout that time, I'm working really bloody hard. And then I became a manager, and then I done a level 5 done a level 4 and then done a level 5 in leadership and management last year. Yeah, I think it was a gradual thing. I think it had to be at those stages, and everything came at the right time. As in, I'd done the training for, as in when I was a caseworker, I had the skills and abilities to be a caseworker, and so on and so forth. And throughout that time, I've had 4 professional mentors through St. Giles. I've had, yeah, and I've done quite a lot of other different trainings as well. But sorry, I'm lost. Well,
no, that's great. What can you just tell? So, what did the mentors do in particular? What sort of support were they able to offer?
Yeah, they were able to speak about. They were able to tell, because they weren't related to St. Giles Trust, although they were the HR in St. Giles got them. They could talk about other things. So for the first mentor, I thought I was going to get made redundant about a year later, so he supported me to do a business plan for a charity. And then the next mentor supported me on how to be a manager and how to manage up as much as manage down. So he was from a bank in the city. So then I became a team leader. And the next manager, or the next person, he supported me basically to build more confidence, so I could do the level 5 leadership management, because I left school at 15. I really didn't feel like I had even though I've worked in this sector for quite a while, I didn't feel like I had the educational or academic skill to do that qualification. And I'm not going to lie, it absolutely bloody killed me. It was torture. Mainly because my trainer assessor was the worst trainer assessor on the earth. But yeah, it killed me. It was about 45,000 words altogether. But then that supported me then to become a manager, and now I manage an ESF project, part ESF and a big lottery project which covers 16 boroughs of London, and 3 partnerships, as well as the stakeholders as well. So it gave me those skills. And when I was doing the training, I didn't actually know that when I was doing it, it took me, for every unit, it used to take me like 2 hours just to actually understand the question. And once I understood the question, I was like, yeah, I did that already. And I was just, because it kind of solidified my working knowledge into an academic qualification. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks, Brendan. We've just got another comment on the chat saying just what a fantastic drive you've got to learn more and to get qualifications, and that this is the kind of culture that we need throughout HMPPS: leadership, coaching, and encouraging staff, mentoring. So yeah, that's brilliant. Peter, is there anything you want to talk about in terms of your route in to the role, and what helped you get your position in probation?
Yeah. So my route was from custody to probation, and it involved going to uni, getting a degree, and then a master's. So I've got a degree in sociology and a master's in criminology. I've done, when I was in custody, I did a number of qualifications through the Open University. Before that time, I was obviously in school, so I've got A-level, I've got GCSEs, A-levels, and 2 degrees. So I'm probably as qualified, if not more qualified, than most of the colleagues that I work with. So that was my route to get qualifications, because I felt that would be important. But interestingly, I haven't always wanted to work in a probation service. And it was only when I was on supervision myself, and the first appointment I had with my probation officer at the time, she you know, that person walked in, you know, with their diary and you know, their notepad and stuff, and sat down, and, you know, was supervising me, trying to manage my risk in the community, and I just didn't feel any genuineness. I didn't feel that that this person really wants to help me, even though they were talking about change and talking about what they should have been talking about. There was just no believability in it. There was no passion about it. There was no, you know, relatability or anything like that. And it was in that moment that I thought, you know, this is what I want to do. I want to do what you're doing, and I felt that I could do it as well as they were doing. And I also felt in that moment that not only could I do it as well, but I'd have more things to offer, because in that moment I felt, you know, this person's missing a trick here, because they haven't even engaged me at all, you know. So it was from that moment that I wanted to go into the probation service, and I was in university at the time doing a degree in sociology. So I volunteered with the British Red Cross for 4 years throughout my undergrad and postgrad, and that gave me experience working with challenging people, because we had a youth bus which we took to certain disadvantaged areas. Sorry, that's my battery saying 5%, so I better put it on charge. We went to certain disadvantaged areas across North Wales, engaging with the young people. And also, whilst I was doing my masters for that year, I volunteered in the local probation office for the 12 months whilst doing the masters, and that also gave me sort of practical experience working in probation, working with offenders. So by the time I came to apply for the job as a probation service officer, I had a degree, I had a master's, I had 4 years volunteering with the Red Cross and a year volunteering with probation service. So I did everything I could to maximize my chances of getting the job. I was very, very aware of my criminal record and the impact that potentially could have. So my idea was just to do as much as I could to mitigate against that, and to have as many positives on paper as such, to counteract that negative from the criminal record. And then I think because I was volunteering there for 12 months, I built up working relationships with the manager in the office and all the probation officers and probation service officers. So when I came to apply for the job and during my interview, I was able to draw on those experiences. That was really important. And then I think after that was maybe a little bit of luck then, you know, because the manager who interviewed me, the head of probation, because it was 2 managers and a deputy head, and the 3 people who interviewed me must have, you know, felt, I don't know what it was, right? But I think you know, there's a little bit of luck in that, you know, they saw what was on paper, but despite that, were still willing to give me a chance. I think as well, you know, my approach was always to be open and to give full disclosure. So at the end of the interview, I said, you know, as you'll see on my application, I've got a criminal record. I went into it a little bit, so, you know, they were aware of it at that stage. And of course, when I was volunteering for that 12 months, I had to have a CRB. I had to go through all those checks just to be a volunteer in the probation office, working with service users. And then, you know, so it wasn't, you know, a huge surprise to them when I came to apply for the job. But again, you know, I was really open, and I think that was important. And then since I got the job and all the different roles I've had within that, that it was an expression of interest to go into the interventions team. It was an expression of interest to do the RJ role, but to become the coordinator, which is a band 4, that I had to be interviewed for that, which was quite nerve-wracking. And my approach has always been to take people on face value, and that has helped me in my career, I think, because you know, you might hear in the office, oh, you know, that person is like this or that person is like that, but you form your own opinions, and that allows you to, I think, get on with everyone if you don't allow what other people say to influence how you know, view people. And that's been important in terms of my journey.
I ask you, Peter, I've just seen on the Q&A, I know I'm going to come to some of the questions afterwards, but this one kind of relates to what you were saying, which someone has asked, can you comment on your working relationship with probation? Is it supportive?
Well, that's an sorry, I'm just putting my phone on charge. That's an interesting question, because when I got the job, I was told by my manager at the time not to. Hello?
Oh, I can hear you, but the picture's just frozen.
Sorry.
Hello?
Yeah, I'm just getting it back.
Back in the game.
Oh.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, I don't know what I've done.
Don't worry, carry on talking.
Oh, here we go.
That's
Sorry
it, you're
about
back
that.
again.
Yeah, so my manager at the time told me not to disclose any of my past with any of the service users, because that then makes it more about you than it does about them. And since then, I have not ever shared with anybody any of my previous experience. What I've done is I have used my experience and knowledge to engage better with the service users. So there's other ways that you can use your lived experience without actually saying, you know, I've done this or I've done that. So
were colleagues supportive? I think that's what the question was sort of getting at as well, I guess, in terms of if they knew or did they not know.
Over the years, I have disclosed my past to a number of colleagues after they have got to know me for me. I contemplated what to do, you know, at the beginning. You know, should I continue with that open disclosure in terms, you know, this is my past and stuff. But in an environment like probation, where you're working with, you know, where your day-to-day work is working with offenders, working with people with a criminal record, some of who are very dangerous people, you know, that played on my mind. And I felt if I just went into it with open disclosure, then that might affect the way my colleagues interacted with me. So I felt it'd be better for them to get to know me first, know my capabilities and know my abilities, so that when I did disclose that to them, it wouldn't alter how they viewed me. And so that's the approach I've taken. You know, they're all in my 6-7 years working in probation, I've had a number of managers and they've all known, and that's not been an issue. The head of the LDU head in our area was aware, of course, and a number of colleagues who I've worked with in the interventions team, in the offender managers team, you know, I've disclosed to as well, and they have all been supportive. But I still do wonder if all the other staff who don't know, if they knew what impact it would have, because I don't know really. It's
but there is a point where your work speaks for itself. It's like in all honesty, you've done more education than 10 men, and where the work that you do on a daily basis, that's who you are. The personality that you are, that's who you are. There's so many different aspects of a person's personality that it's not a conviction. Like
do you know what it is as well then, Brendan? I am quite aware of the journey I've taken, obviously, and then all the, you know, my colleagues will, in my head, I think, what would they think if somebody like me, who despite, you know, the mistakes I've made as a, you know, as a young person, despite that, has still been able to get to where they have got to, and they haven't made those same mistakes.
Yeah.
You know, how that knowledge would make them feel. And that's been, you know, part of my thinking.
It's quite hard.
And then on top of that as well, probably the most overarching thing is, you know, when I got the job, and I was in the probation office after I had gone through my training, my old probation officer saw me, right? And they stopped me and were like, oh, what are you doing here, sort of thing. So I pulled out my badge and said, you know, I'm now working as a PSO, sort of thing. And it was just like, oh, okay, and then walked past. So, and then sort of I reflected over that, and I think I would have liked maybe a warmer reception, and because it was quite cold, and that was like in the first 6 months of me getting the job, that really sort of had an impact on, you know, my willingness to sort of share. So I was like, all right, I best not say anything, you know, because will they all just like be looking at me like that? And, you know, I don't know.
I think sometimes you can see it in people's eyes. So like you can talk to people for about, and you can have some brilliant conversations. You can talk about employment. You can talk about all of these brilliant, passionate conversations. And then you mention, yeah, I was in prison, and they're like, and you can see it in their eyes. They more or less just shut down, and it's just like, what the hell, man? We just had a brilliant conversation just now.
I know.
Like, what happened? What? But then I think I come to realize that, and I don't really have that conversation very often, but I come to realize that that's on them. That's their own personal prejudice, or their own personal thing that they're dealing with, or their blocking, or their barrier that they have. It isn't to do with you, because you're having a great conversation just a minute ago, and you work really hard. It's strange. It's a strange.
Do you know what it is as well, right? I think.
Sorry.
So I want to try and bring Darren in a minute, but you finish your bit, Peter, and then I'll go to Darren.
I think because especially in probation, you know, day to day works with risk, managing risk in the community and in custody, and there is, you know, I think a link in some people's mind between, you know, having a criminal record and being untrustworthy. So if you think like that, and you're aware of somebody who has got a criminal record and has been to custody and is, you know, working with you, you know, I think in their minds, they're a bit less trusting, even if it's subconscious or even, you know, consciously, they're a bit less trusting, a bit more standoffish with that person, because, you know, staff in probation is so risk averse, and work with risk on a daily basis, that, you know, they will just automatically think, oh, you know, there must be something about this person's character that actually, you know, won't sort of gel well with me, even without even getting to sort of develop a good relationship, you know. So they will automatically put those barriers up, which is why I've sort of waited and until we've developed a really good working relationship before I share that. And as well, you know, ultimately, you know, my past, whilst it is beneficial with the service users I'm working with, you know, should be neither here nor there in terms of, you know, the relationship that I have with staff. You know, we're all professionals, we're all doing the same job, you know, and as long as we're all capable, it should be all on capabilities, not on, you know, on anything like that. So, and I'm a firm believer in that. So I just sort of go forward like that, you know, make sure I'm doing everything in the right way and as capable as I can. And there, you know, if at some point at an appropriate time it's appropriate to share that, then I will.
Thanks, Peter. This is, yeah, really, really interesting discussion, and we've got someone commented on the chat about, you know, probation values and it being about embracing change and, you know, and actually, you know, how that balances with risk, and but actually, you know, really that sense of embracing change should be that kind of driving force, you know, amongst officers. So that's just someone's comment from the chat. But I just wanted to bring Darren in. So, you know, what was your kind of route into your role, and what has helped you get where you are today?
My route was, it was kind of, I'd done a few posts and voluntary work with different organisations, mental health organisations, recovery organisations, the NHS, and no qualifications at school. I actually, it was about 2008, I got out of my last sentence, I got out of prison, and I went and joined the college. And it's quite funny now, but at the time it was really embarrassing for me. So the tutor was starting this course. It was a counselling course, and I'm sitting there. I never had a satchel, a pen, or an A4 pad. You know, I was just sitting there, like, never really attended school, getting expelled and suspended. Just like I said before, I was very rebellious. And now I'm sitting in this classroom, and the tutor was introducing the program, and I put my hand up to go to the toilet, and but I wasn't going to the toilet. I was going to run. I was going to leave. And she said, "You got a question, Darren?" And I said, "Can I go to the toilet, please?" And she said, "You're not in school. You know, you don't have to put your hand up. You just go." I got to the door, and you know, I was really raw at this time, like just after, you know, a long time in hell, basically, you know, and I got to the door, and she said, "You're okay, Dan?" And I stopped and I paused, and I turned around and I said, "No." She said, "What's up?" And it's just as simple as just being honest. I said, "Well, what it is," I said, "I feel inadequate. I feel less than. I don't feel like I'm going to fit in. I'm going to complete it. And I've got no pad. I've got no satchel. I've got no pen. I've got my whole experience in the past was to run, and that's what I was about to do." So this lady said, "Sit down. You can have half of my A4 pad. There's some pens. You know, don't worry." She said, "I felt a little bit like that." So I sat down, and I completed it, and I got my certificate, and I went on to do more bits and bobs. But my route into this role was, I took on, I was volunteering with this organisation that went into the prison of being in myself, and my whole perspective from what I used to think and how I used to behave and how I used to what I used to believe in had all changed. And so now I'm trying to amend me patterns in my life, with family, with, you know, in friendships, relationships, and to society. So I wanted to give a little bit back to try and, you know, to the system, you know, and hopefully try and help the lads that have been there, who can give them a bit of hope. So I joined this organisation, and, you know, they allowed me to go in via this really relaxed clearance system that was trusted by the staff at the prison, the recovery staff team. So I started going in there. I went in, just experienced it once, and then I took on a position where it was a 12-month commitment, and I was never late, and I was really excited every Wednesday afternoon to get there for 6 o'clock. And slowly but surely, the staff would say, "The lads are really, like, looking forward to seeing you," because you'd have to book in 2 days before to put your name down, and, you know, for the clearance kind of thing. That's what it was like then. And that went on for a year. Then when my commitment was up, I took on a position where I was the coordinator of the other volunteers to go into the prison. So I've got this relationship with the prison. So I'm the corresponder between the committee and the prison. And so over the years, I was always the corresponder, basically. And then I took on another year commitment because I really enjoyed it. I really did enjoy that. I was gutted when it came to an end, and then someone else had to take over. So what happened for me was that one of them staff members, the recovery managers, this post come up for a group facilitator and a community connector, a subcontract to the well communities. So it was the manager of the prison who rang me. He said, I don't know where you are, work situation, but there's a post coming up and we think you'd be perfect for it. So he gave me the contact details of the CEO of the well communities, who, by the way, I've been in a YOI prison with in 1988. And he's now the CEO of the well communities. And anyway, I applied for the job, and he interviewed a couple of people, and then I got the job. But it's like it's like Peter said there, don't minimize the qualities that we possess, because this manager who used to be my key worker in that prison back in, God, it was like 2003 or something like that, and he said to me when after within the first 6 months, they had team meetings with all this. I think there's about 30 recovery officers within the prison, and we work alongside them. And they had to split the groups into two. And then on our supervision, he came up to tell me, and he said, Darren, he said, I've got something to tell you. I said, what? He said, I just had 2 meetings, the 2 teams from each wing, the recovery wings. And I just wanted to tell you that they love you. And them tissues with, and the joke from now on is he always looks at me and goes, because I felt up inside. Honestly, I just got emotional, and he went, "You getting emotional there?" I went, "Yeah." He went, "Good, because you deserve it." He said, and it's the truth. So that was my role that was my route into this role that I'm in at the moment, and I'm still very passionate. At first, I was kind of, keys. Oh my God, what are people going to think of me? And I know after lads in there from past experiences, that ego, that false pride, that embarrassment and all that. And now, honestly, it's not, the keys are not even there. I don't even think of them, because it's my heart. That's there. So yeah, that's my route anyway.
That's brilliant. I mean, my next question was around the challenges, and I think Brendan and Peter have both sort of touched on the challenges in their answers to the last one. So I just wanted to pick up with you, Darren, about something we've talked about before, about challenges, particularly around kind of vetting and prison entry. And if you could just tell a little bit more about some of the challenges that you've had. Obviously, you work in some prisons, that you've had some difficulties with some other prisons.
Yeah, well, my challenges over the years with the vetting, like I said before, at first, the prison where I work now, it was like the recovery team's trust of the organisation I was working with, and you just ring up and they're trusting me to trust someone, and it was very laxed. And then we had the HM prisons, which the vetting system, because of, because of the criminal backgrounds that, the committee had, was very sort of, well, they'd say, we're gonna put the vetting in. The governor's gonna reject it, but he's gonna override it. Sorry, not the government. The security are gonna reject it, but the governor is gonna override it. So persevere, and we'll get there. Now, this was the stumbling block. So then the vetting form, long drawn out vetting form that you have to compile and go back and find out, all your previous addresses, which most of them was different prisons, police stations that you've been in, really, really complex. And then that goes through, and then that goes on his desk, and then month in, month out for over 18 months, phoning up, knocking on the door, trying to get into the HM prison to offer a bit of hope to someone. And then you get told that it's been rejected, and now you're barred. Now you can't even come in the prison on a gate pass for, I think it was 3 or 4 years. So then the 3 or 4 years passes, and then you're knocking on the door again. Okay, can we come in back on the gate passes, start from scratch? No, you've used 2. It's 3 a year. No, you've used 2 up. You've only got 1. I said, sorry, but how do you make that out? Because I haven't been in for 3 years or 4 years. It's just the way it is. Oomph. Bye. They're the difficulties that we've faced. You know what I mean? That I've faced in the past. Now, with the prison I work with now, my colleague who's got lived experience, he waited 6 or 7 months. His clearance got done. I thought I'd be waiting the same amount of time, and it wasn't. I waited for about 2.5 months, and clearance in, and now it gets reviewed every 12 months, which is up for review again now for me. But the recovery manager said, "Don't worry about it. It's fine. It'll be fine." So yeah, they're the difficulties that I've faced in the past.
Absolutely. I mean, it's my final question before I move on to the Q&A questions is really about, what recommendations really, from the change within report you kind of feel, are particularly important. And I guess for you, Darren, there's that about kind of like the vetting. And I remember actually when we launched this report in November last year at our members meeting, we had another Darren actually who worked for the Care Leavers Association, and he was chairing a panel talking about lived experience, and he'd been working in and out of prisons for about 15 years. And on the day of this meeting, he'd got rejected to work in a prison where they'd had a contract to work with after 15 years, and it just sort of showed, he just sort of used that as an example of, for 15 years been going in and out of many other prisons, and that day of launching this report about lived experience in the workforce, he'd been rejected from a particular prison. So yeah, I think it's a massive one about vetting. So I guess for you, is that one of the ones that you think is sort of important? Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, the vetting, because, just the melting the walls and the, please don't stop coming in, and we need you, and the dilution, and, I think the vetting's like for the prisons, I mean, because that's where I work. Yeah, it's definitely one of my main.
Yeah, absolutely. And Peter, did you have any of the recommendations in particular that you wanted to sort of highlight?
Yeah, as my route was sort of heavily influenced by education and volunteering, I think the most important recommendation from the Change Within report is on sort of university support for fair chance and the pledge and the recommendations about the MOJ HMPPS championing lived experiences and paid roles and producing a strategy and guidance to support employment and progression. Now, in the probation service, they have sort of been opportunities for volunteers to work in the sector, and this has been the case in Wales, and I'm sure is the case in other probation areas as well. And very often those volunteers will gain experience whilst volunteering and can then sort of apply for a paid role. But actually having paid members of staff with lived experience in the probation service is few and far between. In Wales, we have just started a volunteer and mentor. Well, we have a volunteer mentor unit, and that volunteer mentor unit uses volunteers who just the general public and mentors. These are paid mentors who have lived experience to work with service users to sort of engage them whilst they're on probation, improve their compliance, and it helps to manage their risk if you have a suitably matched mentor with a service user. But in terms of, in terms of roles with more responsibility, such as, probation officer or probation service officer, those roles do require qualifications. So, if there was fairer access or greater emphasis from the education sector of giving the opportunities to people with lived experience, that would give them those qualifications they need to be able to apply for the jobs. I do think it's actually very important that a job like probation has qualifications attached to it. I understand that it could be a potential barrier for some, people with lived experience, but if you are able to achieve that qualification, what it shows is capability, right? And as I understand it, degrees and stuff like that, are more about, this person has done a project for 3 years and can learn and can produce work. And you get certain skills as well in terms of presenting, doing presentations, and writing skills you develop, and vocabulary as well, really important. If you met me when I was 16, the vocabulary I had was worlds apart to what I'm using now, because I've read so many articles, I've read so many books, so the words I choose to use to express what I'm saying is different to the words I would have used, when I was 16, 17. So it's important to educate yourself because it helps you to fit in as such, and it gives you that bit more legitimacy, so I think education is really important, and those sort of are the main recommendations I would go. I mean, just to talk more about it.
On that point about the scheme that's in Wales, is for the paid mentor roles, is that for a limited time period, and then is there any progression route after that to become potentially a probation officer? Or
well, the scheme, as I understand it, isn't there so that the mentors can progress into more into roles where there's more responsibility, such as probation officer or probation service officer. As I understand it, the scheme is more about just as it is, employing mentors who have lived experience to work with the service users. I don't think it's been developed with a view for these mentors to then work in the service. Because it's not been made clear that that's what it's there for. What has been made clear is these mentors are there, and it's a paid role to support the service users. I think that the probation service do understand the benefits of having people with lived experience work in the sector. I just think that there are still too many people at the top who are wary of people with lived experience. Because if you've got lived experience, chances are you've also, or you're a greater likelihood of having a criminal record. And if you've got a criminal record, there's the whole, negative connotations that come with that. And that's why volunteering is really important, because it gives you that distance in terms of time from your last conviction to when you go into look for employment. Volunteering is so important because it gives you that distance, and it equips you as well.
That's really interesting. I mean, in a sense, a bit of a lost opportunity. Actually, those sorts of programs could, with the right thought process sort of behind it, the right strategy, be really good kind of pathways and routes for people.
Definitely. I mean, the thing is, though, from a point of view of somebody who works in a probation office, the way staff talk about service users doesn't suggest to me that those staff would be quite welcoming of service users alongside them. So there is a cultural shift as well that's needed, and I think that's going to be a lot harder to achieve, although it's where we need to get to, and more conversations like this is going to be helping us on that way. But because there are so many other massive things you're going to be fighting against, such as class and class is a massive one, isn't it? Life experience and social capital and stuff, like all those really massive things that people in probation tend to have the same of, because the people with lived experience have the complete opposite of that. You'll have, there's a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of shifting attitudes and mindset to view people like that in a different way.
Brilliant. Absolutely. Brendan, you want to come in on that point?
I think people, I've come across quite a lot of really, really good probation officers, and I think more old school probation officers seem to have a better way of working. They seem to have no problem doing I think one of the things we spoke about, doing the walk and talks, meeting people, having a chat with them, helping them and supporting them. And I think there's certain elements of probation where I think people with lived experience would fit in nicely. There's the integrated offender management and MAPA and approved premises. There's those types of I'm not going to say that word. Those types of people with convictions that can be supported. They can be supported pretty well in those. I do think that the mentor role it's not actually a mentor role. It's probably a caseworker role, and that would be like a gateway to another role. I do think it's kind of sick to a degree in this sector that if people with convictions are seen to be the menial jobs or the lower paid jobs or the lower and I think that's kind of it's disrespectful because I guess it's such a very, very wide cohort. The range between someone on community services is somebody spending 15 years or 20 or 30 years in prison. They're so wide, and the knowledge that is in between all of those individuals and the different kind of class structures that they will have came from are all different, and I think it's quite it's I don't have the word for it. It's the word for it that I'm thinking about is actually a bad word. So it's sick that people are deemed to be the minimum wage jobs. I think, and volunteers how they are treated in where it's us and them, or peer mentors where it's us and them, or offenders it's us and them. It's that's not right, because if you're working with the person that's sitting in front of you, and you're working together to support that person who's sitting in front of you, then you're working together as a team. And it's that, and that, like, one of the best teams that I've ever worked on was the Hackney Integrated Offender Management team. It was completely multidisciplinary team. So you had people from substance misuse, you had people from police, you put people from MPS, and it was run by the time of changing to CRC. So you had CRC as well, and housing, and so everybody worked together. When I first joined that Integrated Offender Management team in 2009, the way people spoke about people who are committing convictions, people who are on their cohort, it was off key, and they didn't give people chances, or they didn't give people a minute to focus on their recovery, or jump through the barriers that they expected people to do naturally, because naturally they will be able to do it because they live a normal life and a good life. So but as time went on, 3-4 years later, you could see that the police officers are now picking up the people at their houses, and they were bringing them to drug and alcohol services, and they were speaking highly and nicely about these individuals, or the prison or the probation officers were now even contemplating maybe looking for larger amounts of funding to get big ticket trainings for these individuals, or calling in favors to make sure the person got housed. And all of these, like, I think there is a culture change, and I've seen the culture change over the past maybe however long ago, 10, 12 years. But yeah, there is that look. As I mentioned before, there's that look that people have. You can see it in their eyes, where the eyes just shut, and it's just really, really, it's funny, actually.
I think that culture change is just, such a big one, and part of it, I guess, is sort of that catch-22. Unless you've got that, that mix of lived and learned, like, Anne-Marie's quote, that was at the beginning, to start to shift that culture change. But for the people that are the first ones into that organisation, that can be a real difficult.
I think I'm quite lucky that I work in St. Charles Trust, so there is like it has a culture, maybe because our staffing more or less matches the local community, but also matches the people of which we serve. So
I just want to come to some of the questions. Like I said, we've got 15 minutes left, so I just want to come to some of the questions on the Q&A. I don't think I'm going to get through all of them, but there's a few that I think are really good that I just want to come to. So Sasha has asked about the challenges, which I think you've spoken about, but she's also asked who inspires you, which I thought was a lovely question. So anyone want to come in on that? Who inspires you? Who wants to go first?
My honest answer, right? When I think, who inspires me, I get inspiration from myself and the journey that I've taken. That inspires me to do the best I can do, because I think to myself, if I've been able to make that journey, then so can others. And actually, part of part of my job is to show people that, and it's really difficult to show people that it's possible to take that journey without telling them, so it's over the years I've developed a way of sort of telling service users that it's possible to go from where they are to where they want to be. So for me, I look myself and my mum. My mum's a huge inspiration for me, because over the years when I was getting in trouble as a teenager, she always used to bang home the importance of education. And I think, without her influence, I would have placed less emphasis on education over the years, and which would have sort of impacted me when it was time for me to use that education and use those qualifications. But yeah, that's what it is for me.
Thanks, Peter. Darren, who inspires you?
Who inspires me? I mean, the perspective has changed. For now, right now, what inspires me is values. You know what I mean? It's like I spoke to you about, Nina. It's like getting on the bus a couple of years ago, and the woman on the bus saying good morning. It was raining. It was pissing down, and she said good morning, and it was really like a bleak morning. And I went, I'm gonna say thank you for that. So when I get to come off the bus, I said thanks. She said, what for? I said, for saying good morning. She said, it's my job. I said, but it's not really. Your job's to drive the bus, but you've added a bit of humanity to your role. She said, oh, you've made my day. I said, you've made mine. And she said, well, let's have a good day. And I got off the bus. But going back to like what I shared with you before, of the way I felt and the way I couldn't look at anyone, and it was dark, it was lonely. Back then, it was lived experience. It was a lad. It was a guy that had been in that prison where I worked. I'd been in there with him. I knew him. I knew what he was like. He was happy. He had his family. He had the job. He was free. He was free from the chains, and he inspired me. And then he introduced me to other people, and so my inspiration is growing. And back years ago, my dad was a lovable rogue. He was you know, he was an offender a long time ago. He had these quotes, and I sort of kind of turned on me dad in a way. I sort of blamed him. This is where I've become because you've been there, and this is my life, and it's because of you. Not to do with him. And that's my perspective. And now, my dad's got dementia, but his little quotes that he said back then, and the way he was, yeah, he made some choices, he made some decisions, but he never laid a finger on us. He loved us. He done things to try and, make a home for us. And this is one of them. He wrote this on the wall in Walton Prison in 1970 something, in the 70s. My freedom lies not in the hands of my jailer. No, it lies deep within the complexities of my mind. One day I shall turn my key, and the knowledge I shall find within shall free me forever. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. Peter said it before. That was another little value that I lost along the way. And these values inspire me. The eyes are the windows of your soul. Always look people in the eye and be honest. Don't use the word hate, because it's like a cancer. And before you know it, it'll grow and fester, and before you know it, you'll hate the world and yourself. They were values that my mum used to say. That was one of my mums. So I just get inspired now. I'm just inspired with life. I am. And I try and take the positivity rather than the negativity. So that's me.
That's amazing. Thanks, Darren. Brendan, who inspires you?
I think after having such a long time to come up with something, I wouldn't. No, as my colleagues, first off, they, especially in the past 3 months, 4 months, they inspire me at the moment. I guess what inspired me for maybe the first 5 years was it was just determination to help people, but it was also a determination, and I want to put it quite bluntly, it was to put food in my own fridge. If I continue to work hard, then I continue to maintain a job. If I maintain a job, then it was always so. I think something Peter said earlier. You're having to continually feel that you had to work hard to prove yourself. I continue to prove on myself. So I've been continuously proving myself for 10 or 12 years. So what inspires me was, in truth, to put food in my fridge. Like I do remember standing outside Summerfield in Old Street with vouchers for volunteering, waiting for 8:30 for when they put down the prices of meat, so I could actually provide something. So I do remember doing that. I guess having that, having that memory of the feeling of sickness in my belly. That is what inspires me.
Yeah.
We've got another question on the Q&A that sort of goes back to this question of culture change, and they've asked, how do you think we drive this culture change? I just wondered if there was sort of one thing in particular that, one kind of practical thing or one policy change that you think would help to drive this culture change that we've been talking about as one of the barriers. What would you like to see happen to kind of help shift that culture change?
I would say just see people as people, not as people with convictions. I mean, that's the culture change. The culture change is that you see the person that's sitting beside you, helping the person sitting in front of you as a teammate. That's it. That's the culture change. It has to go from top downwards, because that's the way things are done. But on a day-to-day, it's the person that's sitting beside you helping this person sitting in front of you.
How much is language important in that, Brendan, do you think?
It's compassion and care and empathy. Compassion, care and empathy is having a common goal, which is to change the person in front of you. But as language, I'm not gonna lie, the first 5 or 6 years that I've been working in this, when I was working with certain people, I would use different types of language. I would, like, if I went to a senior caseworker or senior probation officer, I would speak in the best English I could. But then if I was speaking with somebody who was a prolific offender in the IOM, I would speak in a different way, because there's different goals. With the probation officer, it was to get referrals, and with the IOM cohort, it was to improve their life.
I was thinking more in terms of like kind of labels, I guess, kind of.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Offender or kind of other stuff like that. I just wondered if you had any thoughts on.
I'm not gonna lie. If someone called me offender, I'd probably lose the plot. I'm not gonna lie, because I haven't been in prison. Yeah, that's not people with convictions. Maybe it works. To be honest, I much prefer people call me by my first name than a label. Yeah, I prefer names. It's because it's again it's that pronoun thing as well. If you see people as who they are, then it's not about what they've done, or doesn't make sense to me, actually. It really doesn't.
Peter, do you have any?
Yeah, I think for me, the 3 things I noted which would help to make the shift in culture would be conversations, action, and recruitment. So more conversations like this taking place in, probation offices, in team meetings, which are regular, that's a perfect opportunity. You've got all the OMs there, you've got the manager there, have an agenda item to discuss some of these things, and over time, and as the accumulation of conversations build, then that'll help towards shifting the culture. An action as well. With these conversations should come some sort of action to shift the culture, and of course recruitment. Recruitment of people with lived experience would help shift the culture. But from a probation point of view, that's quite difficult, because before you can be recruited to come into probation, you need to have certain qualifications. So, and that in itself is a barrier for people with lived experience, So, yeah, those are the three things I would say really.
Brilliant. And what are your thoughts just on that point about language? Because obviously in probation service, I mean, the word offender is kind of everywhere. It's, you know, you're an offender manager, you know, and I used to work at Prisoners Education Trust, and it used to be offender learning. It was the offender learning and skills service. And we did quite a lot of work to try to kind of take that, you know, the label of learner is a positive label, an offender learner, or, you know, it sort of dilutes the, you know, the sense of being a learner. And so, you know, trying to kind of move away from this concept of offender learning. I just wondered, in terms of going to work in probation and having this word around, does that act as a barrier?
Yeah, I think language is important. Language is very important. You know, there has been a shift in probation in terms of that term offender to service user. So you know, that has been a change, which I can say, you know, a lot of probation staff now refer to people on probation as service users rather than offenders, which is good. You know, there's the whole labeling theory that underpins all that as well. But I think for me, language it is, from my experience, is about what language they use, or what language staff use when we're talking about the service users. How do we talk about the service users? Do we talk about the service users as no hopers, as though, you know, they'll never change, or, you know, once a criminal, always a criminal, even if they're prolific offenders, even if, you know, they've got long history of offending? That's not to say that they can't change, but the language that is used to talk about individuals like this isn't helpful, and helps to reinforce those biases, which sometimes can be unconscious as well. So I think a shift in language is really important.
Great, thanks, Peter. And Darren, lastly, you.
Yeah, very quickly, I think everyone's really covered what I had. I was thinking myself, and the language thing, and not being a number, being a person and a name, is very, like, I mean, for me, like, one of them stepping stones I spoke about earlier was a prison officer who, he said to me, he said, I can see underneath you, you're a good, you've probably got a good family waiting. You're probably a good person. I can see the good in you. You need to get out and be with them. He said, and you need to stop, you know, you need to stop doing what you're doing and mixing with these and doing that, and get out and get these days that you've lost done. Get out to them good people. And this is what happened. I met him. I bumped into him in town, and he was with his wife. And I said hello. I walked over and I shook his hand. I said hello to his wife, and she said, "Darling, who's this?" And I watched him, and he looked at me and he went, "An old friend." It's like, I don't know, that what people are speaking about is not being a label, not being a number. It's so important. And for me, like, it's I think, I mean, it's a long grind and change, isn't it? You know, so I don't know, for the culture shift, I think there should be like organizations should have like workshops on empathy and compassion, and so we can filter down, you know what I mean? Because, and I watched that Daniel Blake once, and it just really it made me see how real it is, you know, close to the bone of how that how it comes down from the top and filters into you. You can't even show a bit of, you know, humanity, or you're going to lose your job. What's that about? That's just crazy. So I think there should be workshops. You should have regular group meetings around that kind of stuff. Something needs to shift.
Yeah, that's brilliant. All fantastic ideas. I just before we finish, I just want to read out a few notes from the chat. So people saying, really inspiring event. Thank you to everyone who's taken part. It's given me lots of think about. really loved the bit about values. It's how I tried to live my life. Great event. Thanks for your honesty and for being involved. Really enjoyed it. Culture change will happen from the drive of management and recruitment, better communication from senior leaders, more meaningful staff training, lots to think about. So yeah, some really good feedback, guys, from that. I know that on the questions as well, people have put, if they want to ask some specific questions to you about, like for example, someone wanted to know more about the mentoring scheme, Peter. So after, what I'm going to do is just sort of share my screen, and it'll have my email address on it. And if people have got specific questions or want to make contact with any of the speakers on particular issues, if you can drop me an email and I'll help to make that introduction. But I just really want to take this opportunity to thank everyone that's joined us today, but in particular Brendan, Peter and Darren for what's been a really inspiring but also kind of challenging discussion. And like you said, Peter, actually it's more of these conversations that need to happen in different spaces and different places. We'll be making some of this available, so if people want to go back into their workplaces, for example, and share some of the clips from this, or then we can make that happen and share some of the slides. And if other people have got any other sort of questions, do email me in terms of thoughts about sharing this and starting these conversations and getting that culture shifted. So thank you very much, and thank you very much to HMPPS Insights, to Nick and to Ruth there for making this happen as well. And thank you very much. I'm just going to share my screen so it's got my email address on it so that people can see.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
See you soon, Bren. See you soon, Pete.
Yeah, likewise. See you later,
Thanks,
guys.
Nina.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye.